Hi Quilters, Dave Keizur for Boardwalk Quilts, and welcome to our first edition of Designer Spotlight. I have with me our first guest designer, and she's Stephanie Prescott of A Quilter's Dream. Hi Stephanie.
Hi Dave.
Okay, we feature many of Stephanie's patterns in our store, as many of you know, and welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Okay, now this is our first edition of what we hope are many of these interviews, and Terry and I have been to several of Stephanie's presentations at Quilt Market and have been very impressed by her. We have talked with her several times while visiting her booth at Quilt Market, and when I asked to do an interview, she seemed really excited about it. So thank you, Stephanie, for agreeing to be our first guest.
Oh, don't be silly. I'm so happy to do it. I'm really flattered you even asked me.
So, Stephanie, let's kick this thing off by having you tell us a short history of A Quilter's Dream.
Okay.
Tell us how you got started and how A Quilter's Dream came to be.
Well, it's really been quite a journey, actually. We've started with the store, and now we've gone into pattern design and wholesale, on the road full-time, and now even fabric. It started, actually, with my mom. She was an avid quilter, and one day she said that it was a dream of hers to have a shop. And that was it. A Quilter's Dream was born. And we decided to have a shop together. She was going to be the creative end, and I was going to run it for her. But soon thereafter, she decided another dream of hers was to move up to Lake Arrowhead, and so the running of the shop and the entire thing sort of fell into my lap out of nowhere. Sometimes you find yourself in the strangest places. And from there, I just started designing patterns as needed at the shop. When we needed a class, when we needed a giveaway, I was coming up with designs. And it wasn't until other shops started asking me about them that I realized, wow, I guess maybe I could sell these. And there you go. And here we are today, full-time on the road, designing the patterns, and now is exciting. Finally got my dream of designing fabric.
You know, I've heard your story several times, and I still marvel at it. It's kind of similar to how Terry and I got started by having circumstances just fall into place. So I have questions that were submitted by our customers for you to answer, so let's get started.
Okay.
Okay, question number 1. Are you self-taught?
Well, everything really stems back from my mom. She's the one that was the avid quilter. I was going to just do the business part. So as I was learning about quilting and the business and, how to put things together, that was all from my mom. So I guess that's how it started. As far as the pattern designs go, that was really from me. That was my curiosity about how things are put together, and especially my fascination with math. I've always been a huge math girl, kind of a nerd, and I love the geometry of it all. That's my favorite part. Early on, I was really into how to mix colors and fabrications and the unconventional pairings, and that's kind of my thing. Because no one actually told me what the rules were in the beginning, I didn't know there were any, so I just did it the way it was in my head. And then people would tell me that was an odd thing to do, but I kind of thought it was kooky and interesting and gave quilts a lot of movement, so I went with it. Eventually, I talked other people into thinking it was cool too, and kind of got a following at my shop because I had a different way of looking at things. So it's really from my mom, but that was sort of my jumping off point, and I guess I went right into the deep end on my own.
So, is your fascination with using fat quarters part of the geometry thing, or is that just to make it easy on customers, or even yourself?
That's really to make it easy on me, to be honest. Obviously, we all have fat quarters in our stash, and most of us have stacks. And again, this came from my mother. I looked in her cupboards, and she had nice, beautiful, neat stacks in drawers and in cupboards, and wasn't using them. And what I realized was, as a shop owner, it was much easier for me to make a kit from fat quarters because that's an easy amount to cut, and I didn't have to plan in advance about what fabrics I was going to need and how much of each bolt. But for the customers, they have them at the ready, and so they know what that is. They can grab a stack and go. So it makes the marriage between the two really simple. I can package it easily, and they can pick it up and understand it easily.
Okay, so now everyone understands why we have fat quarter bundles placed near your patterns and samples in our store. So, question number 2. What is the process you generally use when beginning a design?
Well, I'm still pretty much a graph paper girl, so it's pencil to paper. I just start drawing, and I draw different shapes, and I draw different designs, and I draw different angles until something clicks. It's usually a big mess. And then the more precise it gets, then I really hit the graph paper hard. And that's when I'm really drawing it to scale, trying to see what works as far as different sizes together and how the shapes interact together. And I want to see how one block bleeds into the other and what images that creates. So it's all about the pencil and paper. I'm trying to get more educated with EQ, and I've started to use it more and more, but it's not where I begin. It's usually where I fine-tune.
Hey, I know what you mean. I'm starting to design patterns for our store too, and graph paper is my friend. I don't start to design using electric quilt until what I have on paper looks close to where I'm headed. Now, next question. Where do you go and what do you look at for inspiration?
Oh my gosh, what's not inspiring? Really everything, as general as that sounds. Sometimes it can be specific, like with my Yosemite bag, that was a specific flower that I see in the meadows there that I shared with my kids. It was always our very favorite one. So that was really specific. And actually the bags in general, in their overall look, in the end, reminds me of a place I've been that I really loved. And so that's how I named them, by the cities. But as far as most of the other designs, patterns, and then now with the fabrics, those can come from absolutely anything. Sometimes it's tile floors. I have many bathroom tile floors that I've taken pictures of through my travels. I've taken pictures of carpets. I've taken pictures of textures on walls. And it's just things spinning around in my head. I actually try to not look at other people's quilts. That's one thing that I sort of miss now, is I purposefully steer away from looking at what other people are doing so that I'm not too influenced or influenced away from a place where I thought I was going to go, but now I'm feeling like it might be too reminiscent of something else. I really want everything to just be in my head and feel like that's where it came from. So it can be the shapes on a door. It can be shadows. Just look around. There's nothing but inspiration everywhere. Color, shapes, sizes, angles. I just love it.
It's true. Almost anything can inspire you when you're open to it. So, what considerations do you have when designing?
As far as the pattern designs go, the biggest consideration was sort of self-imposed, which was my affinity for fat quarters. So in my attempt to make virtually all, though I'm not going to be completely strict, but virtually all of my patterns fat quarter friendly, I'm limited to how you can get those units out of a fat quarter. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. If it's not very efficient, then I don't want to use it. If I can't make it work in any logical way, then I don't go forward with it. I have a stack of designs that just can't easily be converted into fat quarters. Having said that, I've always told myself that if I found a design that I absolutely loved and I couldn't make it work in fat quarters, I'd still do it, and I would just do it in whatever cuts were necessary. I still believe in that, but I'm always trying and thinking of it in terms of fat quarters. As far as fabric design goes, my considerations are really if I'm working in print or batik. So far, I've been working primarily in batik, but I do have a bunch of ideas that I'm working on for print lines. Doesn't mean anything's going to happen with it. They're just ideas right now, but I'm hoping that I can really get those to be solid, cohesive groups so that when I present it to the people that I'm working with, that they'll accept it. So keep your fingers crossed for me, okay?
Oh, we will. I, for one, can't wait to see what you'll come up with next. Now, sticking with the concept of design, what personal preferences influenced your choice of design?
Well, I guess that as far as preferences, it's really what attracts me to other things I've seen along the way. And generally, I'm attracted to things that are a little bit traditional or certainly have their base in tradition and yet then take you somewhere you weren't expecting to go. So a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more modern, a lot of movement. I like movement. I also like, and you may have noticed if you've ever seen one of my designs, I like a lot of different fabrics. 5 fabric quilts are just not doing it for me. And even when that's out of my fabric, I came to find out when I first had to make some of my patterns out of my very first line of fabric, which obviously I was so excited and so looking forward to doing, I found it a tad bit difficult because there weren't quite enough for me even to work with. So that's how kind of insane I am about the number of fabrics I like. Texture, texture, texture. I'm trying to make essentially a new fabrication out of all the pieces of other fabrics together. Think of it like a collage that then becomes one single look. That's to me how I always see my quilts. So I think I have a contemporary spin on things. It's funny, wherever I go, when I'm in California, they always, my customers always talk about how traditional I am and that they love that and they like that I still have a nod to tradition, and it's nice to see that people aren't going so crazy and, you know, being too far out there. And when I go to the Midwest, everyone says, "Oh my gosh, you can so tell you're from California. You're so wild." So it's so funny for me to see that I guess in some ways I can sort of fit in a lot of different nooks and crannies and different places, and people can find what they like and what they find attractive and appealing in my designs. So without even trying, I feel like I've reached a lot of different people and I'm not just in one box. So that's kind of exciting. Wow, these are really good questions.
Well, I can't take credit for all of them. Our listeners provided most of them. But here is one I'm sure everyone wants to know. What influences your color choices, and what are your favorite color mixtures?
As far as color, I'm kind of odd there too. I tend to not like the primary colors. I tend to not like especially clear colors. I tend to like the off shades, just a little tweak different. The colors that are difficult to explain. If you find a particular green that you say is kind of like seafoam but a little warmer than that and has a little more blue tinge to it, then that's probably the color that I really, really like. If you know exactly what it is and if it's been named as a crayon, it probably isn't my favorite, but it's close. If we can just make it a little more one way or the other, then I like it a lot. Reds, I almost always like the softer reds, little more brown reds, I guess, deeper tones. Those are my favorite. I like light colors though, and I like dark rich colors. Neutrals are key to my existence. I can't imagine my life without them. To me, beige, gray, tan, eggshell, those are all vibrant colors in my world. As vibrant as red and purple and azure. So I'm always confused when people consider them blenders or something that is a background. To me, that's the whole thing. And really probably my very favorite of all-time quilts that I've done or have seen others do are, I saw one that was all shades of gray, that was truly the most stunning quilt I've seen to date. It was a Baltimore album, done traditional needle turn in a million shades of gray, and she had it dead on. It looked like the most beautiful Baltimore album you've ever seen that you photographed, like Ansel Adams photographed this in black and white, and that's how she made the quilt, and to this day it's the most stunning thing I've ever seen. But taupes, and tans and creams. Those, I just don't think anything is as elegant, quite frankly. When I saw my first quilts from Japan that used some of the Japanese taupe fabrics, and this is way before we had them here, that really was a changing moment for me in color. That's always what I was attracted to and where I was going. And it was very difficult to find those shades before they existed in those fabrics. Other people weren't doing them, and it just wasn't what was popular at the time, but that's what I always saw in my head and was trying to create. I was doing a lot of bleaching and over-dyeing to create that look at the time. And so when I first saw those at one of the international quilt markets, it really changed everything. It made me feel like I wasn't alone in the way I saw the world and the way I saw color, and it just really set me going as far as, it was full steam ahead at that point and going for the way that I see the world. And I guess it's through taupe colored glasses a lot of the time. Though I'm big on color and I'm big on texture, it's just all how you mix it. My favorite color is green. Though because of that, I tend to have very few green quilts in my booth because I'm always so worried that everything will become green if I let it. And my black and tans are by far my most successful. I made a black and tan quilt years and years ago and had such huge success with it that I started to over dye black and white fabrics because I couldn't find enough black and tans to serve my purpose, and certainly not because I used so many fabrics in one quilt. I needed such an array. So I literally have spent in my children's, very sadly, I'm sure all they do in their heads at night is smell and dream in tan dye. Because I literally was dyeing fabric pretty much every, I would say 4 or 5 nights a week, was dyeing fabrics at home constantly to have enough for black and tan. So I always have black and tan quilts. I always have black and tan bags. To me, it is the most versatile neutral, and it's not as cold as black and white. It's a little more sophisticated. It's a little warmer. I think it's a little more adult. I just love it. So that's what I like to work with. But don't limit me. The minute you limit me, I'm going to go somewhere different. So just watch out. You won't believe this next line that I'm working on. It's not colors that I think you would expect to find from me, and I'm pretty jazzed about it.
Okay, that's fair warning. I can't wait to see them. Next question. Are you encouraging the modern quilt movement?
That's an interesting question. I first so strongly believe that absolutely anything that inspires and excites quilters and gets new quilters, young people that maybe never even thought of quilting involved in this hobby is hugely important. And I am all for it, and I will wave the banner and be in the front of the parade. So as far as that part goes, I'm excited that anything new and fresh is going on. So I think that's terrific. My slight issue with it is that to me, it's really such a huge nod to Amish quilting. A lot of what I see, I've seen in the traditional Amish quilting, except that instead of a black background, they've used a white or a gray background. And that does put a spin on it that I think is fresh and new and interesting. I guess I just wish a little more kudos was going to our foundations and really our roots and where we came from. I think it's always okay to include the influences from the past that give you the creativity to take it to the next place. So it didn't come out of nowhere. I see where it came from, and I've loved it all along the way. So that's how I feel about it. As far as the solid fabrics that the modern quilters are using, I think it's great. It's a nice clean look. It clearly really isn't me because I'm so about the texture. When I first got into quilting, solids were still really strong, and we obviously had a huge selection of them at the store, and most of our fabrics had solid backgrounds, even if it was a floral or anything like that. I was personally so inspired by the movement that fabrics began to have as more and more of them began to be printed in Japan, and that the textures and the depth that then was possible within fabric, and it wasn't so flat. That was truly inspirational for me personally. So that's where I jumped off, and that was my parade. But the fact that there's any parade going on, I'm thrilled. And like I said, I'll be the band leader or the baton twirler or whatever job is necessary to keep it going.
Well, I know if you're leading, there are many who will follow. Now, here's a loaded question. How do you manage your career and home life?
You're kind of putting me on the spot, aren't you? Well, when you use the word manage, it makes it sound like things are under control, and that would not be true. It's just been a learning process the whole way. When I had the shop, I was able to get home and pick up the kids from school and go to practices, and we did whatever we needed to do, and we got dinner ready and dyed fabric and folded fabric all night at home, and then went back the next day. Now, with my daughter starting her senior year in college, and my son just finished his first year, so that's exciting. So it's been my first year of the empty nest, which has been great, but sad and fun. But really now there's no reason that I need to go home. I can work all the time. So it's been hard to actually make sure that I make the time to do that. Most of the time, I'm gone and on the road 20 to 25 weeks out of the year. So obviously I'm living out of a suitcase most of the time, but I'll be honest with you and tell you that I got my outfits out of the suitcase today, even though, the last time I was home, I still live out of the suitcase. So it's a little crazy still. It's just, you juggle as many balls as you can in the air and hope that very few of them hit you in the head.
Sounds incredibly hectic to me. So, what does a day in your life look like from beginning to end?
Well, I don't really have a typical day because I have the day from beginning to end when I'm on the road. There's the day that I'm a crazy driver. I drive everywhere I go in a big box truck, style and fashion at all times. So I will drive from, say, 6 in the morning till midnight, something like that. Can be later. Sometimes I just pull over on the side of the road. Sometimes I stay in a hotel. It just depends on how things are going. I just drive as long and as hard as I can to get there. So that's a not very exciting day, but our country is absolutely beautiful, and I get a ton of inspiration everywhere I look that I go. When I'm at the show, then obviously that typical day is getting up really early and putting my totes that I worked on all night in the room on a dolly and carrying it to the truck, loading it on the truck, driving to the convention center, taking the stuff out, taking it into the booth, replenishing the booth, serving the customers all day, which is the only fun part of the day, and then I go home back to the hotel at night, probably microwave a TV dinner, and then I cut and fold fabric all night long. But I really love all of that. It just does get a little much sometimes, and it doesn't sound as exciting as I would like my answers to be. When I'm home, then I get up in the morning and I go into my studio because I don't have the self-discipline to work from home. I am one of those people that if I'm home, I get distracted about the millions of other things that I could and should be doing, and so nothing really gets done. But if I go to work, even the shoebox little studio that I have, I do work there. So I go to work, and typically I answer emails, I answer phone calls. Hopefully I get to design either a pattern or some fabric, or at least work on some sketches. It takes me I'm a slow designer. It takes me a long time, so I rarely can get through something in one fell swoop. But it's a lot of hit and misses and designs as I go, and math to try to figure out what's going to work and that kind of a thing. I put special orders together. I might do a couple things on the website. And I try really hard to get home before midnight if I can. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. I have been known to sleep at the studio, but that's my least favorite thing to ever do. But it does happen because sometimes it seems silly if I'm going to literally turn around in 4 hours and come back. So I dig out some quilts, I put them on my floor, and I go to sleep. So it's a super good thing that I got into this business or I would freeze.
Wow. So do you ever relax?
Relax, relax. I've heard of that word. Tell me again about it.
You must do something. What do you do to relax?
Okay. Well, my biggest thing is that I guess for the last, 13 years maybe, my kids and I have gone to Yosemite once a year. That's been our annual family vacation every year. It's our favorite place, and that's really where I let things go. But pretty much any time I spend with my children is the best time, and doesn't really matter what we're doing. I love to see movies, but hardly ever do, but I really love to. And I'm an avid reader, but again, I don't have time to read, so all that time I spend in the car, I listen to audiobooks, and that really does help quiet some of the voices that are always screaming in my head about some shape or some color or something else that I need to do. And it gets my mind to at least go into someone else's life, which is always more interesting than mine, and I get to live there for a while. So those are probably my favorite things, other than sleeping. That's pretty good too, and I get very little of that, and it really is definitely in my top 3 favorite things to do. So we'll try to work more of that in.
Well, I could take off with about another 3 or 4 questions just from that answer alone, but it's time to wrap this up with one last question.
Okay.
So, where will your next design go or take us?
I'm working on some new quilt designs that I'm excited about. I have some a little more graphic, I guess, and really easy to put together, but deceptively so, or at least that's the goal. No one will know how easy it was for you to do it. And I think they'll really show off the new fabrics well. As far as the new fabrics go, they're really kind of cool. Different and something I haven't done yet, so that's, I'm hoping, gets a really good response. I'm excited to show everybody. It's a little pop art, it's a little modern, it's a little edgy, a little unexpected, but what's great about it is that there are a lot of different ways to separate the line into very specific looks. So it can be an overall collage, which you know I love, or you can have these very defined groupings that you could use the same line of fabric in 5 different quilts and never know it was the same line because they're going to look so different when you pair it that way. But it's pretty cool and fresh, and I'm very excited about it. I am not really supposed to tell you too much about it, but there's red, there's black, there's green, there's gray. Shh. Let's just keep it between us.
Okay, it will be our little secret. Everybody, you're sworn to secrecy until the line debuts. All right. That's it for this edition of Designer Spotlight. Stephanie, once again, I'd like to thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, I just want to say that you and your wife have been so incredibly supportive for me from the very beginning. And you've, encouraged me really from day one, and it's meant so much. So thank you for asking me to do this. Thank you for all your support. It means a great deal.
Stephanie, I've told you many times that you're much better than you give yourself credit for. And now our audience knows just a little more about the designer behind those incredible patterns and fabric designs. So, once again, this is Dave Keizur for Boardwalk Quilts and Stephanie Prescott for A Quilter's Dream. So long, everybody.
Well, thanks again. Bye, everybody.